Greetings. The filmmaker I chose for my final project is Jean-Paul Le Chanois. The reason why I chose Jean-Paul was originally because I saw his movie Les Miserables, which was directed and released in 1958. I was originally drawn to the movie because I love the story of Les Mis. Les Mis is very popular in France. It's as popular as Romeo and Juliet is in America. Um, like I said, it's always been a favorite story of mine, whether it be told through the musical, the book, the various film adaptations, or even comic books and video games now. It tells a thrilling narrative while exploring social issues that somehow are still relevant today, even though they were really prevalent in the 1800s. Um, Rather than deem certain issues inevitable, Les Mis takes the approach of tackling these issues and calling people into action to change these things. Because I'm such a fan of the story, like I said, I try to see every single adaptation that there is, and Jean Paul's is one of my favorites because it remains true to the original story written by Victor Hugo in 1832. The plot of Les Mis has many characters, but the main character is Jean Valjean. Jean Valjean is a criminal who was arrested for stealing a loaf of bread. He served about 20 years in the French penal system before he's released. But once he's released on parole. And the deal with parole in the 1800s in France is that you used to have to present your parole papers everywhere you went and to anyone you ever did any kind of business with. This included places that you could sleep, to rent for the night, places to buy food, and everything. Also, at that time, the poor and the criminals are deemed worthless in society, whereas the rich are deemed greedy and only worthy of what they can give to the worthless people of the society. Um, Jean Valjean finally finds a place to stay with a deacon, and this man decides to show him mercy when Jean Valjean steals from him. So rather than turn him in and for his crime that he committed and send Jean Valjean back to prison, the man decides to show mercy on him and say that he gave Jean Valjean that silver and it's okay, but he forgot the best part and proceeds to give him more silver. Jean Valjean is just so confused by this mercy. He has no idea what to do. His first reaction is to steal again, just because that's the life he's always known. However, after further reflecting, Jean Valjean decides to live a life full of mercy. But the only way he can do this is by completely stripping himself of his criminal past. So, in order to do good, Jean Valjean must become a new man, both physically and metaphorically. So Jean Valjean breaks his parole and changes his name to make a valuable life for himself. However, every time he changes his name, moves to a new place, this man, Inspector Javert, seems to find him. Now, Inspector Javert kind of serves as a parole officer. Um, he has a lot of faith in the French penal system, and he believes that it does the best that it can do. While all this is happening, Jean Valjean's on the run from Javert. Every time Javert finds him, they have a group of revolutionary students who plan a rebellion against the monarchist government of the time. They're very pro-Republican society. Um, so additional storylines that are featured are also the storyline of Jean Valjean's adopted daughter, Cosette, with her love interest, Marius, who's also one of the revolutionary students. And then another girl who used to be wealthy, but now has lost her beauty and is just now poverty stricken. She's in a love triangle with Cosette, her love interest, Marius, and herself. Her name is Eponine. So the film progresses with these students, Jean Valjean, Javert, Cosette, Marius, and Eponine, until the eventual rebellion of 1832. It was not a successful rebellion. Jean Valjean saves Cosette's boyfriend, I guess, Marius, and he tries to bring him to Cosette. He runs into Javert, of course, which he always runs into Javert. And he shows Javert mercy. And after that, Javert has no idea what to do because here's a criminal showing him mercy when Javert should be the one casting judgment and Valjean should be the one casting judgment as well. So Javert eventually decides to kill himself. Um, at the end of the movie, Jean Valjean dies. A lot of people die. Jean Paul's version of this film was not liked by critics at the time. Um, it's also important to note that it premiered right before the French New Wave era, so that could have a lot to do with the critics not taking it very well. Obviously, audiences liked it a lot because the film was the second most widely seen film in France in 1958. Excuse me. The only thing that audiences did not like about the film was that it was released in two parts. So instead of seeing the movie as one movie and paying for one ticket, they had to pay for two tickets, which is understandable that people wouldn't like that. I wouldn't like that either. Some of the reasons why the critics didn't like the film were that they described the scenes as too clean. And when they say too clean, this is a time in France where poverty is it's very rampant. So I can understand that, but I think he does a very good job at staying accurate to the story. It's filmed in East Germany, but it's set in the early 1800s in France, mainly in Paris. So some of the style choices that Jean Paul made were very, very good style choices. The music is very haunting and dynamic. During scenes between Marius and Cosette, the music is kind of playful to reflect this new love that's happening. But of course, in scenes with like the barricade character deaths, it's very, very haunting or serious social issues being brought up. Sometimes the filming seems a little clumsy, but mainly it's only during scenes with the barricade, which I think might have been intentional to reflect the chaotic energy felt by the characters fighting not only for their lives but the country. So I think for the most part his style choices reflected really well on film. Themes throughout the film are kind of the same in every telling of Les Mis. We have redemption, we have justice and injustice, and we have judgment. Those are the three main things that are prevalent themes throughout every story of Les Mis. So redemption is a process that one person might constantly have to fight for. So Jean Valjean transforms from this hardened criminal into this compassionate man full of love. He's a person with a criminal past can never really advance in life as they would always be branded as a dangerous person and held back. There's a line that the narrator says at the beginning of the film, and it goes something like the ex-convent passport, which they had to present everywhere, followed them like a ball and chain. So that's to say that they could never redeem themselves and they would always be seen as a prisoner. We also see this with Javert, which I'll explain a little bit with Judgment. So the theme of justice and injustice can be seen at all points throughout the movie with almost every character. By looking at characters individually, each one of them make unethical choices. However, Les Mis presents a message that still holds some truth in our time, and that message is that morality is a privilege that only the wealthy can afford, which I think is a super important message, and it's super important to look at the choices that the characters make because it may seem unethical, but then when you look at the actual circumstances, it's kind of understandable. So then the last theme of judgment kind of combines with the theme of justice and injustice. Um, so Javert is kind of like this legal system
personified. He believes that everything should be black and white when in fact the world is gray. Valjean is kind of that gray area that we see in the legal system. We see how imperfect the legal system is. For instance, Valjean commits crimes throughout the entire film, but they're for the greater good and they're morally good choices. However, if you look at them in the light of committing a crime, then obviously it looks wrong. So then Judgment is a film theme because every character lives in this reality that consists of harsh judgment. Ex-convicts and the poor are just considered to be worthless, whereas the rich are only worthy of what they can give, and otherwise they're seen as greedy for just living their life. This is really seen with Jean Valjean when he's shown mercy for stealing silver. He's so confused that he can't even process how a man could show mercy to him. In fact, his first instinct was to steal again because he has no idea what to do with this mercy that was shown to him. He's so dumbfounded. It's such a foreign concept. In contrast, Javert is dumbfounded by the mercy that Jean Valjean shows to him. Rather than being transformed into a man like Jean Valjean who shows mercy over judgment, Javert can't find a way to go on, and he can't live in this contradictory society where he wants it to be a world of black and white instead of this gray mix of everything in life that he ends up killing himself. Today, Les Mis is still relevant for a couple of different reasons. So, as I said before, Les Mis is kind of the Romeo and Juliet of France. It's a popular story that practically everyone knows. So, it's relevant for that reason and it always will be relevant. I think this film in particular is relevant because it's most accurate to the original story, as stated previously. So, in addition to being relevant just because it's known, I think that this film in particular is relevant because it kind of symbolizes how everything that was an issue during the filming, during the original story that was written in like the 1800s. It's still relevant today. The themes are still there. The story is still there. We still see everything that's happening in this film happen today. We see it with the Black Lives Matter movement. We see it with, the shootings in school. We see it everywhere. We see this oppressive government in not particularly our country, but maybe other countries as well. These are still issues in modern society. And I think when we have an accurate story, such as this one, telling this story, we can only learn from it. Not this film, but in the novel, there's this passage which Enjolras, who's the leader of the student rebellion, speaks about how the world will someday be this great place with no judgment, there will just be mercy and love. And I think that's such a hopeful message. So this movie's relevant because it gives this message of hope that maybe someday society won't be as terrible as it's depicted in the film.